Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today we are recording episode 148. Before I introduce our guest, I want to introduce my book, which is the same title as this podcast. It's called A Gift from Adversity by Juri, Juri Love, and it's available on Amazon. The subtitle of this book is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. I have experienced these adversities when I was in Japan, and this book is about my life and how I overcame these adversities. So, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's invite our guest. Hi, Punam. Thank you very
Hi.
much for coming in
Hi.
today.
Thank you so much for having me, Juri. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's start with your name, where you coming in from today, and what you do for your work, and if you have any social media that people can follow.
Sure. So, my name is Punam Saxena. I am a parent impact coach, which means that I work with parents and schools to build partnerships between the two so that the children are able to get the support that they need to succeed academically. I am coming to you from Washington, D.C. That is where I live. And currently, I am in a doctorate program working to get a degree in education. And my social media handles, really, you can find me on every platform, but LinkedIn is where I'm the most active, and I enjoy seeing that the professional camaraderie. So LinkedIn under my name, Punam Saxena.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's dive into our first question, which is the adversity. So, can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
So my adversity was that I grew up in a very rural town in Georgia in the 1970s. And Jury, you're too young, so back in the 70s, it was really difficult to be something other than either white or black. My parents had immigrated from India, and my father wanted to spend some time gaining momentum in his career. So he took the only job that was offered to him, which was in Georgia. And we ended up in this rural town where, now remember, this is 1970, right after segregation, and everyone is being moved all over the city for schooling. And then here we come as an Indian family trying to adjust and assimilate into a black and white narrative, which was very difficult because a lot of people did not even understand where India was. And they assumed way back then that we belonged to some Native American tribe. So we often got asked, what tribe are you a part of? Where is your reservation? And so, out of frustration one day, and I remember this so clearly, my father said, "We're Cherokee." And me as a 7-year old said, "What do you mean we're Cherokee? We're not Cherokee, are we?" And so there was a learning curve not only for our family but for the community that we lived in. And the adversity was trying to be who we wanted to be, which was a bicultural, bilinguistic family in a community that truly refused at times to accept that. And to navigate that as a child is very difficult, especially when your parents are doing their best to assimilate and keep everything going while you're trying to navigate the social and cultural aspects of your life. And so there were times when, even academically, it impacted me. There's a particular story that I share, and probably why I do the work that I do now. When I was in second grade, I was given the gifted test because I was excelling in school. And I had taken it in the first grade and not made the marks. And then I took it in second grade, and I distinctly remember the second grade episode, not as much the first grade, but the second grade episode was when that score came back, and the teacher told me that I had not made it for the second time. It crushed my entire being. I didn't know how to recover from that because, in essence, I was being told that I was not good enough. And the hard work that I was doing was not commensurate with the standards that were in place for education, which was primarily for white Americans. And that took me, and gosh, it took me a long time to understand that that was the breaking point for me at the ripe old age of 7, that I was struggling because I was not acknowledged for what I was bringing to the table, the experiences that I had, the value that I was um, instilled with to share with the world. And it was a struggle. I went from being a very good student to being a less than mediocre student. And it impacted my self confidence. It's impacted my relationships with everyone, including my parents and my brother and my friends. So, one piece of the issue that we have in America, especially, is that we don't highlight and accept and embrace those differences and the values that they bring to this country. And instead, we overlook it oftentimes and assume that everyone is going to fit into the box of what Americans believe America should be, instead of the true melting pot of ideas and cultures and traditions and beliefs that America was founded upon.
Tell us about your experience, not only the school academically, but the friends and peers you mentioned about mistakenly for Native American. But what are the things that people said besides those words? And then I was born 76 in
Oh,
Japan, so we're pretty much similar. But like in Japan, obviously, we don't have black people, white people, but we do have untouchable. We do have kind of hidden caste system still uh, underneath of the forefront. But how is it? How is it going with how was it when you were growing up in Georgia? You mentioned about the segregation, and then you were not necessarily maybe put it in black category, but minority, I would say. And then, what are the slurs, racial things that you've heard besides Native American?
there were times that people thought that I was a mix of black and white, that I was a mulatto child. Um, and that was frowned upon in those days. Um, no one wanted, it's interesting when you talk about relationships, no one really wanted to hang out with us because we were different. And, people did not want to catch whatever were exuding, or whatever we were believing in. And we often got asked to go to church. I found that very interesting. We would often get asked if we wanted to go to church because we wanted to be. They wanted to save us from our own religion, and I remember even my best friend in high school said, I really want to take you to church. I think you're going to find it so enlightening. And it's very difficult to navigate that type of situation when, we as a different religion are not coming into your home and telling you how to practice your belief system. So it's difficult to understand and comprehend, and almost at times it's angering when people talk like that, because it diminishes you as a human being, and it provides an opportunity and a premise that one culture is better than another. And you were talking about in Japan the hidden caste system. In India we have the same thing. And there's a fascinating book by Isabel Wilkerson called Caste. And it breaks down it's actually a comparative book of the caste system in America and how the Black stories and narratives fit into the American uh, culture, and then it compares the Indian caste system. And it is amazing how similar we we treat people that we perceive to be less than. In America, we do it by color. In India, we do it by some very nebulous idea that someone has better genetics than someone else. And it's such a difficult and interesting as well road to navigate. When we talk about challenges, and I was talking to you about the church a few moments ago, in fourth grade in our county, there's a group called the Gideons, and they bring a Bible, a pocket Bible, to every fourth grader in the county. And I did not take a Bible because, that's not our religion. And my premise was that my parents would be upset. So that evening when I got home, we were sitting at the dinner table. And of course, as every parent does at the dinner table, how was your day? And I said, it was fine. And my parents said, so they did not offer you a Bible at school? And my jaw dropped. And I said, how would you know that? And they said, the teacher called. And so we had this entire discussion about religion. And my parents said, you should understand that there's not one religion that is bad. Every religion is good. They teach the premise of being a good person, of loving your neighbor, of helping people, of service. And that story sticks to me, has stuck with me for so many years, because the next morning when I went to class, I had to go pick up that Bible. And I still have it somewhere. But it's the thought that my religion was not good enough or is not good enough, that I need that imposed upon me. So when we talk about the slurs, maybe not the verbal ones, but the social context ones were very prevalent, very prevalent. As I reflect upon those incidences, it reminds me of how divided our country was at that time, and maybe still is.
So I watched Origin.
You want the origin?
I watched the movie
Oh,
Origin.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
about Isabella Wilkerson.
Yes.
And then my friend, Sujata's friend, was in the movie
Ah.
because they studied the doctor who broke the caste system in India. And then when I was watching Origin, so I agree with you. It was very interesting. And then Isabella Wilkerson is the Pulitzer Prize winner that really depicted the comparison between Nazis, Holocaust, um, and then Indian caste system, and then Black racism in America. Um, it was very interesting because in Japan, this social status in Edo era, it was Shino Kosho, which is the samurai is on the top,
Mhm.
and farmer is next, and then Ko is engineer, and then the bottom is businessman, business people. So, but then there's untouchable buraku, which kind of existed still, is existing still. That buraku people are put in different part of area, and also they can't marry somebody outside of buraku, so the blood gets thicker. So there are more people with mutation, and they just get discriminated or disabilities and stuff because blood gets thicker. So I completely understand, and it was very interesting comparison between the black racism and then the cast, and then not just. And I highly recommend watching Origin, the movie. Uh, I haven't read the book, but it's very interesting. So now you've lived with this discrimination, and then the religion, and I do this too. Like I'm from Japan, where I never watched, like, no, I've never seen church. So it's very interesting. So how did it affect your adult life going through that in childhood?
It affected every part of my life. Uh, when I went to college, I had so much growing up to do because I had shut myself off from believing I could do anything. I felt that I was just a below average person who had no motivation, no excitement about life. I just, I was searching, I was lost. I was searching for someone or something that would renew that excitement that I felt when I was a child. And I will say, Juri, that I'm still struggling with that. I don't think when you have trauma like that, or any type of trauma, any type of adversity, anything that uh, affects your life as a child in a negative way, I think you carry it with you the rest of your life. Uh, the people that you meet, the people that that I have been fortunate enough to meet, um, have helped me in some ways, but at the core being, I'm still that same 7-year-old child who doesn't think that I'm good enough. And I'm constantly struggling to prove to myself, not to anyone else, but prove to myself that I'm good enough. And I think that that never goes away. Yeah, it never goes away.
It's very sad. How about your relationship? How did it affect in terms of interacting, especially white people, at workplace, your personal relationship with friends, or even romantic relationship? Um, were you scared to interact with white people, or like some of maybe biases that you kind of anticipate?
I've always lived in a community where whites are the majority. And so I've had to learn how to navigate that while keeping my own identity. It's something that I think we learn to manage and to figure out what is the path of least resistance And so it's sometimes easier just not to say anything and just go with the majority, and then you go home and you do what you want to do. But as I was going through my middle aged life, or my younger middle aged life, and I was having children, I realized that I have to speak up for them, not me. And so that gave me that strength, that inner strength that I needed to say, we're different. We're okay. We will follow so many rules that you all have imposed, but then there are things that we're going to do as well. And there will be a divide, and we need to all accept that. So I was I was on the board of a visioning committee in the community that we were residing in at the time. It was a county-wide visioning committee, and I was on the board. And there was the mayor, there were a couple of city commissioners, there were some business leaders, and then there was me, who was who was an advocate for the community and wanting equity throughout the county. So interestingly enough, they started every one of these meetings with a prayer. And I thought, wow, I'm out of place here. I don't think this is where I want to be. And this is a visioning committee. We're supposed to be bringing in every voice we can find to make sure the community is doing better. And so I called the director after this meeting and I said, okay, if this is how these meetings are going to go, then I want to do the next prayer. And she said, what do you mean? And she knew that I'm not Christian. And I said, well, if we can do a Christian prayer, we can do a Hindu prayer. And so the next time, um, the director said, okay, Punam's going to lead the prayer. And every person in the room looked at me going, how is she going to do the prayer? I did the entire prayer in Hindi. And then I said, for those of you who did not understand what I was saying, let me say it in English for you. And after that, we never did a prayer at the beginning of the meeting again. And it was my subtle way of saying, if we're going to be inclusive, then we need to be inclusive. If we don't want to be inclusive, then we're going to have to make some changes. And that was a pretty big step to have the mayor and the city commissioners and business people sitting there. And I remember after that meeting, the director called me and she said, that was pretty bold. And I said, at some point, we can never move forward if we're only going to stay where we are. And from that day forward, I didn't lose any respect from anyone. In fact, the mayor gave me the key to the city a year later. So I didn't lose any friends, but I did gain respect from not being in my cocoon and putting everyone above me. And so the relationships evolved because I was willing to stand up and say something. And as long as I was silent, they were going to continue doing what they were doing.
Well, thank you so much for shedding a light for this um, issues that we deeply have. So, how about so that was it in Georgia? The prayer thing, the meeting.
It was in Florida.
Oh, it was in Florida.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very, right? Very interesting for it
But
to be in Florida.
how is it in DC compared to say Georgia? And then also the time has changed. But how is it now? Are you facing any discrimination? Do you feel less of discrimination and more acceptance? Do you face any challenges still in DC?
None, none. I'm very, I'm embraced by everyone. No one looks at me twice. Um, I feel energized because it's okay to uh, accept everyone and not be noticed by anyone. And so it's a liberating feeling to be uh, accepted. And and people generally in DC, and actually I haven't met anyone in DC who has been anything other than kind. So I also think, and you bring up a good point, Juri. Geography has a lot to do with it. Education has a lot to do with it. Uh, Compassion has a lot to do with it. And in 2024, unfortunately, politics has a lot to do with it.
I'm a journalist, and I'm very mindful of what I choose to write and then what I choose to put on the social or even this podcast. Also, I'm a filmmaker, TV producer, movies such as Origin. Um, it's definitely the DEI.
Yeah.
My son is 13 and he just got nominated for DEI category in the Emmy that we're going on this Saturday. But DEI, sometimes I had a conversation with my friends about the concept of DEI is really good, diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, the execution could be extreme and it could push to a different extreme. My son and my daughter definitely had a portion of discrimination being biracial in 2024, still, sadly. But at the same time, it was very interesting. My son had told me, however, he was called so many racial slur words like Negro, Black monkey, um, monkey, whatever, brownies. So, like, Amalo, what's the word that you said people thought you're biracial? And then it was like very
Mulatto.
mu-
Mulatto.
mulatto. So my kids actually maybe fit, but nowadays it's biracial are more embraced, like you said. And then in the modeling and acting industry, it's called for. And then there's even a term called racially ambiguous,
Hmm.
really ambiguous. And that is the category that markets looking for, that my kids fit right in that era. Where if it was 70s, obviously they would never have a modeling job. My daughter was on a billboard or bus. My son is in a bunch of movies and TVs because of the DEI and because he's nominated. Interestingly, my son told me on the student school survey, he had noticed there's an AAPI month where we celebrate Asian people, where he was nominated for Emmy, and Black History Month. So he said on the survey that why there's no white people month, why there's no white celebration month, because there are so many white people that helped us elevate our lives and then mentored my son, majority of them. And then why can't they be celebrated? And I see the point is the DEI execution in the way that we talked about, which I'm happy that we have this conversation in these days where obviously in 70s and 80s in America never had that.
Right.
So what is your opinion of the pushing the DEI execution in the right way or wrong way, that it actually disadvantaged the Black people, minorities because of the push? And then my son saying that we should have, if you want to include like people of color, we should include white people and celebrate white people. And it was very impressive to me that him being biracial and see that way, because why can't they be equalized? And then I had my first husband as a white husband was reverse discriminated for salary, where black female got more salary, less of experience because of DEI. So that's what I mean about the extreme execution of DEI. So what do you think of that?
It's interesting that you asked me that question. I just finished a book yesterday called Racial Frameworks, a multi-dimensional, I forget the rest of it, a multi-dimensional discussion on race. And it's by Zeus Leonardo. He's a professor out at UC Berkeley. And he breaks down the four theories that are attributed to race. And one of them is called whiteness studies. And it's interesting that your son, who obviously is brilliant to have picked up on such a important nuance, is that race is, according to this author, race is compared to the white narrative. So if you take the white narrative out of a conversation, there really is no conversation. So we need to understand the white mindset and the white belief system and their culture, because we, as a Japanese person and as an Indian person, we attribute who we are based on the white culture. We don't go around in India, we don't go around and go, I'm more Indian than you are. We're just Indian, even though there's a caste system. But if you take I'm an Indian in comparison to a white person, now we have something to compare to. And so race is a huge piece of the white narrative and everyone's narrative. So your son picked up on something so important that we do need to have those conversations to understand. Now, I will also say that because we are finding our voice in a country that really has not allowed us to have freedom of expression, that we have Asian American Pacific Islander Month, or we do have Black History Month, we do have LGBTQ Month, and that is only to highlight the contributions of those uh, marginalized communities. But if you take all of these months out, it is white history year. Every narrative, you watch the news, you watch the media, everything is coming from that white framework. But if you are a marginalized community, it's incumbent on you to understand that white narrative so that you can figure out where you fit in. And so when we talk about DEI, we have to make sure that we have everybody at the table. DEI is not just people of color or marginalized communities. It is everybody. It is white people, brown people, gay people. It is the entire gamut of human beings, because we all have to understand each other before we can eradicate the concept of DEI.
So it's very interesting. And then I want to, before I forget, highlight about code switching. So one of the things that we learned from the Harvard professor who teaches public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School,
Mm-hmm.
older Black professor that obviously faced a lot of discrimination, being Black professor, told my son code switching, and then there's an interesting word, comprehensive dissonant. And comprehensive dissonant means that people try to put certain race in a different boxes. So I feel like your test that when you are 7 years old that you had experience that really demolished um, your self-esteem at a young age. Um, that should not have happened. And then um the people forcing you to different religion or Bibles, those should not happen. But at the same time, hiddenly, that he was teaching us the importance of code switch. So where if I am associating with Japanese people, I would talk differently. And then if I'm associating with maybe Black people, I would maybe speak differently. If I'm in multicultural group, I would code switch and then act differently. So those are sadly the tools that you have to kind of fit in to
Right.
not be bullied. So one example is I have Chinese American born friend that loves tofu, but he wouldn't order tofu dish during get together with white people because white people think that tofu is gross. So sadly, he had to kind of code switch and never order, or like he would maybe Chinese restaurant order General Gao chicken or something. So what I'm saying is that um, sometimes you need to smart out to not be bullied and then navigate because it's not worth for you to crash your mental health and not being able to move forward and be productive because you already know that like sadly you have to kind of um arm yourself and then prepare yourself. So how are you? So we are out. We actually want to switch to the next question, which is the tools that you use to overcome. You made a really great point about the prayer part of it that you did the Hindi and that kind of stopped the prayer during the visionary committee. That's very interesting in Florida. But I love this part of the podcast because every single guest of 148 episodes had different tools. That's not from internet, that's not from the book. That's really from the personal struggles and trial and error that they combat different adversities. So Panam, can you tell us what are the tools that you use to overcome your adversity that truly worked for you?
So, first of all, I am not a confrontational person. So, if I am in a situation and I feel that I'm being attacked or belittled or shunned upon, I usually will not say anything, especially in a public setting. But I will find a way to sit back and reflect upon that situation to maybe educate that person better, maybe take them to coffee and talk to them and say, I respect your opinion. I would like for you to respect mine as well. And here's my opinion. Um, I also am learning that social media has been very helpful for me. It's been very therapeutic because I can, of course, behind a screen, but I can put out content that elevates my voice as an Asian American, an Indian American, and people can either read it and comment or they can keep going. But very soon you start to realize who your community is that will support you. And so I feel for me, social media has been a great tool for elevating my voice and also finding people that like you who have had similar experiences and we can connect. And it's not that we are going to have a party and cry, but we're going to elevate each other up because we've traveled the same journey of adversity and felt uh, discriminated against or felt less than because someone felt the need to feel superior than the other. So that's one thing that I've learned. Those are two things that I've learned to do. The other thing that I've learned to do is accept who I am and be proud of that. I am an American by nationality. I was born here. I was raised here. I fit in the culture here. The only thing that sets me apart is my color. And when I go to India, and by ethnicity, I'm Indian, because you were talking about code switching, there's something called translanguage, and I'm sure you have experienced this, is when you're speaking one language, you're immediately thinking in the other language. You're thinking in Japanese or you're thinking in English. And so I do that frequently. So I may be saying something to you in English, but my brain is thinking it in Hindi. And that's something that I think is a gift. And I used to think it was a deterrent. I always thought it held me back, but I'm realizing that it's actually a privilege to be able to do that. And yeah, the tool that I have is I'm okay with who I am now. I have a husband. I have 4 children. Am I'm doing great. I have a career. I have books. I have a TEDx talk. I have all of these things, and it's all because I know that I'm now good enough. And that's the biggest tool I think that we often overlook is our own self confidence, our own ability to overcome. Because if we are an immigrant, most immigrants in this country have had to overcome some kind of adversity. That on its own makes you a very strong person. And that is the biggest tool.
I love that. And I really want to echo with you about trans language. I've never heard of that term. But say, for instance, when I'm tired, I can't speak English. And like when I'm angry, I can't speak English. And I'm always like thinking in Japanese. In a way, it kind of protects me from raw feeling when I speak English. So, for instance, I wrote my book, A Gift from Adversity, and which is heavily about my father who sexually abused me and abused us. That I, s- I just said I can't write in Japanese. I can't talk in Japanese because it's kind of the trans language in a way layers us and kind of protects us of our raw feelings in a way. And it's very interesting that you embrace that and then use it as a tool to embrace the adversity. I think it's very great perspective, and I love that that you are now confident and have great life in the family despite all these challenges from the childhood. And I think I want to echo it with you of all this adversity that I've faced and I'm facing. That I always tell people you only have 24 hours minus the sleeping time. Where would you pound yourself with all this nonsense people had said to you and cry over it versus being productive and just let that go and then really move forward and then be the voice like you are, and then be in the visionary board or author, the podcast, social media content creators that you do have the voice and you do have a shift that you are in charge of if you don't give the power to the perpetrators.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that goes for anyone. It's not just, immigrants or people of color or white people or every single person deserves that. And I believe that is my mission is for everyone to feel valued for who they are. And that is why I do the work that I do because I don't want any other child to feel like I did, to struggle like I did. And I also want to say that it's not my parents' fault. It's not the school's fault. It is not anyone's fault. It was a circumstantial event because my parents are very, very supportive and loving and caring, and they would do anything. And the school did not have the resources or understanding or desire to change. And so it's no one's fault. It's circumstantial. So when we talk about adversity, we have to think about the fact, and your story is so just horrible to me. I don't even know how to put that into words. But these social adversities, like school, um, that are not physical and that are not physical, that are not, um, gosh, abusive. Those are situations that we can look back on and we can grow from. Just like you've grown from your experience, you have coping mechanisms that many people who are not sexually abused don't. And you're able to solve issues that maybe you could not have had you not had that experience. So each of our experiences make us stronger, and our adversity stories make us the strongest. And that has nothing to do with race, it has nothing to do with culture, it has to do with human beings.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much. It's very interesting I just remembered. So I'm a journalist and I speak okay, but I never spoke English before. But somebody said to me, "Oh, you speak English very well." So I'm like, is that a compliment or not? Like, it's just like interesting that. But we always encounter those moments or whatever at any moment. But this conversation was very important. And then thank you very much for sharing your childhood and personal stories and your parents' story and then the love. But I would say the biggest reason why I started this podcast, wrote my book, is that we all deserve the voice. And we all deserve the opportunity to be safe to tell our stories. So I thank you, Punam, for your advocacy and really creating intergenerational impacts and changes that my kids and then their grandchild or whoever would benefit in the future.
I hope so. That is my goal.
Yes. And then my last question for you is a gift that came from your adversity. So, what would you say to our audience? What's the gift that came from your adversity?
The gift that came from my adversity is that I'm a better person, I'm a better friend, um, and I have developed the empathy and the understanding to work hard to to embrace everyone, regardless of how they treat me or how they look upon me, um, but to value them for who they are and what they bring to the table.
Well, thank you very much again for your time. Before I let you go, if you can give advice to somebody who's facing the same adversity that you face, what is your biggest advice?
Besides, call me. Um, um, my biggest advice would be to believe in yourself, because no one is going to advocate for you like you will.
Well, thank
And the other piece of advice that I would give is, if you see someone who is facing adversity, to give them a hand, take them out for coffee, text them, be be a presence so they know that they have an ally in their corner. They may never tell you what that adversity is, but they will very much appreciate to know that someone thinks positively of them
and they will remember that moment.
every time.
Well, thank you again for the beautiful interview. And thank you to our audience for listening to A Gift from Adversity. We'll continue our conversation and we'll see you next time.